19. For the record, it is Wednesday, January 2nd. It's a few minutes after 6. We'll start with roll call attendance. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam?
Here.
Councilmember Burnt?
Here.
Councilmember Palmer?
Here.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Here.
Mayor DeVeard?
Here.
And Councilmembers Little Roberts and Borton are absent.
Item number 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you will all rise and join us in the pledge to our flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3 is our community invocation, and I don't see Larry Woodard, who is going to lead us. So we will move to item 4, which is adoption of the agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Cavanagh.
checking. I move that we approve the agenda as published.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes. Mr. Clerk, anything under item 5?
There are no signups, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Item 6 is our consent agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Cavanagh.
again with no changes, I move we approve the consent agenda as published for the mayor to sign and the clerk to attest.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. If there's nothing to discuss, Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
All ayes. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move to item 8A, which is an update under our Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. And Jared, it is great to see you.
Great to see everybody. Thank you for having me, City Council. So I'm filling in for Ben Hutchins, but I am also on the Executive Council as Communications Coordinator. We didn't have a full month in December, of course, because of the holidays, but we did have our Christmas party. So we also coupled that with our sock drive. We had over 60 people in attendance, and that was a lot of fun. We had our ugly swear contest. We had a lot of games, and we also had a gift exchange. And the sock drive also went well, so that was good. Another thing that we do every year, so that was a lot of fun. And then we also delivered cookies on Christmas Eve to people that had to work on the holiday. So we had a couple different locations, as you can see, senior centers, the Village, Maverick, and hospitals. And we baked over 100 cookies and hand decorated them. So that was a lot of fun, and it went really well. So we'll probably be doing that again. We also have a couple upcoming events. So January 14th, we have our Participatory Budgeting Expo. So that will entail a workshop too, where we can get together in groups and really define the details, like why we're doing the project, some partners in the community that we will be possibly working with, and other details like prices. So that will come January 14th with the presentations. And you are all welcome to come to that, as well as the legislative breakfast. We'd love to see you guys there at the legislative breakfast, where we will be presenting legislation to lower the voting age in primary elections to 17 if the individual will be 18 by the general election. So that'll hopefully increase voter turnout and start habits young in voters. And of course, it'll be the same voters that are voting in the general election, so it's not reducing the voting age per se. I guess it's there's a few more details, and we'll explain them during the legislative breakfast. And again, we would love to see all of City Council there. And also on that Saturday, we have our Teen Activities Council sledding event. and that's a lot of fun just to have kind of team bonding and just fun. So then we also have Youth Lobby Day, partnering with the American Heart Association. We are lobbying at the state capitol for a couple different issues, and hopefully also check in with our own legislation. And yeah, I'm opening up to questions now if there are any.
Thank you, Jared. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Jared, thanks for being here during your holiday break. It was appreciated. The Participatory Budgeting Expo, I didn't hear the time. Do you know what time that is?
The time will be 6 o'clock on Monday. That's our normal meeting time.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions?
Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you
I have
for
some
joining us
handouts.
tonight. And I have a question for Jody. I guess I'd ask you to come up. At the last PB meeting, it was discussed that we wouldn't have the expo on the 14th, that it would be more developing groups behind each of the ideas so that they could all come together and refine the why and the presentations for an expo at a later date.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. I suppose the best word to have used would not have been expo, but within MIAC, they will be presenting the top 5 and then working together as groups to further develop those ideas before they're really presented as something to be voted on.
Okay, so it would be the following meeting that they would more have the voting exercise, the presentations.
That's right.
For
full presentations.
Looking for feedback from council and
That's
that
right.
sort of thing later in January.
That's right.
Okay.
Anything else?
No,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item, item 8B, is kind of an introductory from one of our newest Meridian businesses, Cottonwood Creek Behavioral Hospital. And if you would like to come forward. Thank you so much for joining us and being here to introduce your hospital. And I know you have an invitation to come out to the grand opening and
That's correct,
to
Madam
an
Mayor.
open house as well.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, City Councilman. We appreciate the chance just to come in briefly and give the city an update. As you all may recall, with a lot of support from the City of Meridian, we were able to purchase a property in February of this year with the intent to open up a new psychiatric acute care hospital in Meridian, Treasure Valley area, Cottonwood Creek. My name is Phil Sheridan. I'm the hospital administrator for the project. I just wanted to give you folks just a quick update. We've invested, approximately $15 million in capital into this remodel project. We are on time to finish and open our doors January 14. We have a temporary certificate of occupancy. We're in the building as we're speaking, training our first 60 staff to be partners with us and actually opening our doors on the 14th. And as you referred, we do have an open house the evening of January 9th between 4 and 7. We extend an invitation to anyone that's available to come attend and tour the building and just see the work that we've done. I think it's going to really be amazing. We're really we're excited to bring new services to the Valley and to Meridian in particular, and we think the facility itself is really going to be a showcase for what a behavioral health hospital in 2018, 2019 can really look like for us. So we're excited for consumers and patients and families, and just appreciate the opportunity to give the City of Meridian an update. And I don't know if anyone has any questions for me about the project, but I'd be happy to try and answer.
Thank you, Phil. I know in talking to your office that a couple of our council members have also RSVP'd, and so
Okay.
there is great interest in seeing the facility. We've seen it as a couple of things up to this point, and appreciate the vision that you had for it, and certainly the services that you will provide this valley and our citizens.
Yeah, we're really happy to be part of this municipality in particular. It matters so much to have a receptive town to work with, a receptive city to work with, and you guys have just been tremendously supportive, and we really wanted to just extend our thanks for that as well.
Thank
tonight.
you.
So,
Council, any questions? Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming. This is a first where we've had a new business just come to introduce themselves and to do a personal invitation.
Yeah.
So appreciate that.
absolutely. Thank you for that.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Burnt.
when is that open house next week?
Next Wednesday.
Next week, the 9th, the evening of the 9th, between 4 and 7. Yeah, anyone's welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
We look forward to it. Okay, item 9A, under action items, we'll move right into our public hearings. I will just give a brief overview. This is your first city council meeting, the process that we follow is detailed in your agenda, but we first have staff give their staff report to talk about the project and if it meets our codes and our comprehensive plan, and give council a little further detail about the application itself. Then we move to the applicant, who has 15 minutes to provide additional detail and visuals that they sometimes will bring. Then we enter into our public hearing process, and we hear from you, our citizens. Public testimony is 3 minutes in length, and there is a clock on the screen at the podium, so you can kind of keep an idea of where you are in your time. Council, at the end of the public hearing, will hear from the applicant to present any additional follow-up to what has perhaps been brought up in the public testimony. And then we'll stand for questions from our city council members. Council has questions typically for staff, the applicant, and sometimes members of our public who have offered testimony. Then the public hearing will be closed, and council will render a decision. And that decision is made on the public record that is on our website, so there's written information from various agencies and minutes from the public or planning and zoning public hearing as well. So with that, I will ask staff to, I will open the public hearing for H 2018-0122 and ask for staff comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The first application before you tonight is a request for annexation and zoning. This site consists of 1.68 acres of land. It's zoned R1 in Ada County and is located on the north side of Interstate 84, east of South 10 Mile Road. This property was included in the Primrose subdivision plat and designated as a public use area, but never developed as such, and has been being used as a pasture. This designation was vacated in 1979 and was recently removed from the plat. Comprehensive Plan future land use map designation is low-density residential. The applicant is requesting annexation and zoning of 1.68 acres of land with the CG zoning district, consistent with the commercial future land use map designation. Because the future land use map designations are approximate and not parcel specific, the applicant is requesting the adjacent commercial designation to the west to float to this property. As you can see, the future land use map is the one on the right there. The applicant has submitted letters from the abutting residential property owners, the Atwoods, the Hennesses, and the Plumbers in support of the request. The applicant proposes to develop the site with a parking lot to serve a future development phase of the TM Crossing, a development to the west containing professional offices. And as you can see there, this is the site here with the red line around it. A 25-foot wide landscape buffer and a 6-foot tall fence will be provided along the north and east property boundaries to screen the parking area from the adjacent residential uses. Public access to the parking lot will be provided from the TM Crossing development to the west via Navigator Drive. Emergency access to the commercial development will be provided from the east via West Verbena Drive along the north boundary of this site within the existing unimproved right-of-way. As a provision of annexation, staff is recommending a development agreement containing the provisions in Section 8 of the staff report. The Commission recommended approval of the subject application. Mike Wardle testified in favor, and no one testified in opposition or commented on the application. Written testimony was received from Mike Wardle, the applicant's representative, in agreement with the staff report. There were no key issues of discussion at the hearing, nor were there any changes to the staff recommendation. No written testimony has been submitted since the Commission hearing. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. Council, any questions? The applicant here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Mike.
Happy New Year to you. Thank you very much. Mike Wardle, 12601 West Explorer Drive. Sonia has provided all of the information. I would be happy to answer questions, but it's simply an extension for parking for a future building in what is now becoming really a very substantial business park at the gateway at 10 Mile. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions at this time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no sign-ups this evening.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Yes? Happy New Year. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Denise Lefevre, 6706 North Salvia Way, Meridian, Idaho. And I just have a couple comments on it. First of all, just to acknowledge we're in the middle of a comprehensive plan change. And this is, even though you can float it, you got to draw a line somewhere. And we have an extensive 10-mile plan, which this is outside of, just noting that. And I've sat through over 2 years of planning and zoning and city council meetings. And the staff in the past has said that when we're going through making these changes, that it is in our best interest to have prelims, landscaping plans, and all those documents right up front. This is missing the prelim, it's missing the landscaping plan. So with all of this said, I'm not against this by any means, but I would like to see, it says at a minimum in the development agreement. At a minimum, I would like to see in there that the restricted use is for the parking lot, so that as citizens, we know that's how it's going to develop. And in addition to it, nowhere in there for people living around there. The people are okay with it, but if they sell it as a residence, there's nothing in there about the parking lot lights. There's nothing in here. And in addition to that, there's no timeline for the developing of this to get the landscaping and whatnot in there as well. So I'm not against it, but I think we still, depending on who the developer is, it shouldn't matter who they are, they should follow along with the processes. And this is a little vague on the minimum requirements, so I'd like to see the use restricted to a parking lot and something to address the lighting.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Is there any further testimony? Okay. Any follow-up from the applicant?
Madam Mayor, again, Mike Wardle. The development agreement will specify the use. The parcel will not be developed until the adjacent building that's depicted just beyond the yellow line comes in and includes this as part of that development. At that point, there will be specific landscape plans and so forth, but to do something at this point is really not useful. So all of the necessary procedures will be followed in the normal course of development when a project comes forward that includes this parcel. Be happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Mr. Wardle, Happy New Year. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That building, what's your guys' timetable? Is that 2 years out, 3 years out?
Madam Mayor, Commissioner, Councilmember Cavanagh, I would assume well within 2 years. There is interest, but nothing that I can reveal at this point.
Or would I ask you to?
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, follow up. A date certain of 36 months from annexation. Is there any heartburn?
Is this a new policy, Madam Mayor? I'm not certain that once it's defined by development agreement, there is no sunsetting.
No, I'm just
So
spitballing here.
I would not encourage the council to get into that because you'll see it again if something changes in the economy, and I don't know that you want to open the door for having to bring everything back that would normally be handled through the development process, design review, and CVC process, CZC process. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anything further? Okay, thank you. Staff, any further comments?
Madam Mayor, just to reiterate, staff is recommending a development agreement that does tie development of this site to the concept plan shown before you here. It does include provisions for buffers to adjacent residential uses, as well as to I-84 pathway requirements, pedestrian connections. It's quite inclusive of all those things. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Mr. Kavner.
I move we close the public hearing on item H 2018-0122.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Kavner.
move we approve item 9A H 2018-0122 as presented. The D is in there. It's
Second.
A motion and a second to close, or I'm sorry, to approve item 9A. Is there any discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 9B is a public hearing for H 2018-0115. I will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The next applications are a request for annexation and zoning and a preliminary plat. This site consists of 36.22 acres of land. It's owned RUT in Ada County, and it's located at 2445 East Amity Road on the south side of Amity, west of Eagle Road. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation is low-density residential, which calls for 3 or fewer units per acre. Annexation and zoning of 36.22 acres of land with the R4 zoning, which consists of 19.94 acres of the site, and R8 zoning, which consists of 16.28 acres of the site, as shown there on the overhead before you. The applicant is requesting a step up in density from low-density residential to medium-density residential, which is 3 to 8 units per acre, without an amendment to the future land use map. In residential areas, the comp plan provides for other densities to be considered without requiring an amendment to the future land use map. The gross density proposed is 3.6 units per acre, which is only 0.6 unit per acre more than allowed within the low-density residential designation. There is an existing home and several accessory structures on the site that are proposed to be removed prior to development. A preliminary plat is proposed as shown, consisting of 130 building lots and 19 common lots on 36.22 acres of land. A mix of housing types are proposed, consisting of single-family residential detached units, 106 of those are proposed, and attached homes, 24 of those are proposed, ranging in size from 1,350 square feet to 4,000 square feet, with an average lot size of 7,659 square feet. One access is proposed via Amity Road, A Stubbs Street scrub pine at the west boundary is proposed to be extended, and stub streets are proposed to the south and east for future extension. ACHD is requiring the stub street to the east, shown there, to be shifted to the south approximately 375 feet between lots 11 and 12, block 7, which will necessitate provision of a pathway north of that within the same block in order to comply with block face standards. Landscaping is proposed within the development, consisting of a 50-foot wide street buffer along Amity Road with a 20-foot wide berm, parkways along local streets within the development containing mitigation trees, and common open space areas along pathways. A minimum of 10% or 3.62 acres of qualified open space is required to be provided, along with a minimum of 2 qualified site amenities. The applicant is proposing to provide 5.46 acres or 15% qualified open space, consisting of a 2.5 acre park, common area containing pathways, half the street buffer along Amity Road, a minimum 50 by 100 foot common area, and common area with a pond. And the qualified areas are as shown there on the open space exhibit. Site amenities are proposed as follows: pedestrian pathways throughout the development and a segment of the city's multi-use pathway along the 10 Mile Creek corridor, a community swimming pool, clubhouse, a sitting area, and additional qualified open space, approximately 20,000 square feet, above the minimum required from the quality of life, recreation, and pedestrian or bicycle circulation system categories. Staff also recommends children's play equipment is provided as an additional amenity. The 10 Mile Creek runs along the east boundary of the site and is required to remain open as a natural amenity. The Beasley Lateral crosses the site and is proposed to either be relocated, meander north and west through the site, or diverted completely to the pond at the southeast corner of the site and the creek. The applicant is unsure at this time. Fencing is proposed within the development in accord with UDC standards. No fencing is proposed along the multi-use pathway in the creek. The UDC states that fencing along natural waterways shall not prevent access to the waterway unless determined by council to be necessary to protect public safety. If council determines fencing is necessary, a requirement for fencing should be added. Conceptual building elevations and photos were submitted for future attached and detached homes and the clubhouse proposed within the development. The clubhouse and single-family residential attached units are required to comply with the design standards listed in the Architectural Standards Manual. The rear and side of 2-story homes on lots that face Amity Road are required to incorporate articulation since they will be highly visible from the arterial street. The commission recommended approval of these applications. Matt Schultz, the applicant's representative, testified in favor, as did Stephen Stark. No one testified in opposition. Kathy Stark commented, and written testimony was received from Matt Schultz, the applicant's representative. The key issues of discussion was the opinion that attached homes are not appropriate for this development, and concern by the Starks pertaining to floodplain on their property resulting from changes to the site and an increase in the water level of the creek. They did request for an off-site condition requiring the size of the culvert to be increased underneath the bike path to equal that of the culvert going underneath Amity. Key issues of discussion by the commission. Really the only item of discussion was the requirement for a children's play structure to be provided within the development as recommended by staff. The commission did end up removing that requirement. The only outstanding issues for council tonight are 2. The first is applicant requests council approval of a step up in density from low density residential to medium density residential for a proposed density of 3.6 units per acre. And lastly, the staff recommends a new condition is added requiring a pathway connection through Block 2 in the vicinity of lots 7 and 8. That'd be right in this location right here, to comply with the block face standards and provide a pedestrian connection from the common area where the clubhouse is located to the pathway along the creek. There has been no written testimony submitted since the commission hearing. Staff will stand for any questions.
Council, any questions? Is the applicant here? Happy New Year. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Happy New Year, Mayor Tammy and Council. Matt Schultz, 8421 South 10 Mile Meridian. I'm here on behalf of Berkeley Building Company. We've done a couple projects over the last few years. Smaller ones, we've done 33 homes in the front of Sutherland Farm called Bancroft Square, and we also did Pond Subdivision, which we're now calling Settlers Lane, over on Meridian and Ustick, 20 lots. And happy to be here at Berkeley Building Company. They do a high-quality product. They also do a diverse size of product types. Those two I mentioned were some more of the more efficient lot sizes of 44 and 50-foot wide lots. But he also builds with some builder teams around town, and say like Reflection Ridge on some of the bigger lots too. And he's excited to showcase his whole portfolio and try to hit a couple different price points, if you will, in a high quality area with some high quality amenities that everybody gets to enjoy within that community, regardless of whether they live on a little bit less large lot or not. So we're excited to present a comprehensive community as well. What was difficult about some of those smaller ones is you got 5 acres, you got maybe a little playground, maybe not, and it just, how do you really make it his own Berkeley Building Company project? And so this gives him an opportunity to plan that out comprehensively, and we think we've done a good job of having a diversity of product type as well as centralizing some open space, ample open space above and beyond the minimum requirements. And in fact, we would have more. In fact, we do have more, just can't count it. Typically, the detached parkways, you get about 5% extra, which we've done. We put extra trees in those to compensate for some of the large trees around the house, and it's going away, and so we didn't count those, but it's still there. It's just not qualified. So we'd be even higher than that even than we already are on the stats. But it's we're excited about to have a pool, big open space. It's a 2.5 acre park. We kind of lose some scale looking at this plan, but it's about a 230 by 170 foot open area just west of the pool. It's a pretty large play area there. The owner, we thought about putting a playground in there, and he was like, well, we got a really big open area there, and I'd rather just, it doesn't really add any value for me for his market of who he's looking at. And so we thought, because of the ample extra big open space, that it wasn't necessarily required that we do a playground. And so commission agreed with us. That's what we proposed. We've also got a pathway along the 10 Mile Creek and regional pathway. And as far as the fencing goes, there is no fencing, I don't think, anywhere along the 10 Mile on the creek side. These drains and ditches, like Tuscany, there's a multi-use pathway along there, and there's no fencing between the pathway and the creek. It's just at the backyards. Then you have your pathway, then it's open. If it was a canal, like a Reidenbach, then you definitely want to fence both sides. So we're not proposing anything that's unsafe or out of the ordinary by not having that fence. In fact, I was surprised that condition came up because it just isn't done along these drains. So that's the fencing issue. As far as our neighbor, the Starks, they live across the street on Amity. Amity is a 5-lane arterial. That's what it will be when it's all built out. There's a flood zone that goes down the 10 Mile Creek right now. There's an existing 36-inch culvert. Theoretically, in the 100-year event, it backs up. There was a flood problem, so we're going to work in conjunction with ACHD and build a huge box culvert across Amity and into the Starks property a little bit. And just north of that, there's essentially the Tuscany pathway wants to cross, it will cross the 10 Mile Creek, and there's another culvert there. So we assured them at the last hearing, and we'll do it again here tonight, that we're going to work with the ditch company. It's kind of out of ACHD's jurisdiction, but to basically extend the pathway the rest of the way to Amity, as well as make that big enough that their flood zone does not get worse. In fact, it's going to get a lot better. It's going to go down. And so we're committed to that. So with that, we concur with staff's recommendations for approval, and we'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Mylum.
Happy New Year, Matt.
Hi.
So I'm going back to the playground.
Okay.
I know that's my area. And you said you didn't feel it, or the owner didn't feel like he needed one because of your clientele. So is this a 55 and up subdivision? 'Cause that's what that would mean to me.
Not necessarily, Mayor, Councilwoman Milam. Not necessarily. Just in general, we just felt that the bigger open space, and that was the amenity versus the playground. Doesn't mean to be 55 and over. It just means that he just didn't think it was a big marketing thing, or it was just something that he didn't want to offer. He'd rather offer the pool and some other things, which obviously can't be used year-round, but playgrounds aren't either. So that's just a developer's choice. So he decided not to, and obviously if it's a sticking point for council, we're not like, oh, no way, we're not going to do it. So it's just, we've submitted without it, and we'll go with your recommendation.
Madam Mayor, follow up. And I'm only one vote. I feel very strongly that there should, I think it's great. I love your amenities. It's beautiful, and you have all that space. And I was just recently at a birthday party at a clubhouse, and the kids were all leaving the clubhouse to go play on the playground because it was right there. You could see it through the windows. And I was just thinking what a great amenity the playground was right by the clubhouse, so you weren't cramming a bunch of kids and grown-ups in this thing. So, but by my calculations, this subdivision could have anywhere between 100 and 700 kids. So, and swimming pool could only be used like 3 or 4 months a year. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Matt, all in one phase, anticipate?
Mayor Tammy, Councilman Cavanagh, we're looking at probably 3 to 4 phases. That's what we're looking at for the 130 lots.
Madam Mayor, follow up. Talk to me about timing. When should you get approval? What are we looking at as far as a timetable for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3?
Hoping phase 1 by this fall, and then probably 1 year after that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this time?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Burnt.
Hi Matt, how are you? Happy New Year. And what phase would the clubhouse fit in? Plan for?
Yeah, Mayor Tammy, Councilman Burnt, we're looking at doing it the first phase. We think it's a strong marketing thing to have that done and not hanging out there as a carrot. So that's where we want to do it in the first phase.
Anything further? Okay, thank you very much.
Matt.
Madam Mayor, excuse me. If I may, I need to clarify the record. I did I misspoke and said that there was no written testimony submitted on this application. There were actually 2 letters. One from Stephen and Kathy Stark, and that was in regard to the issue pertaining to their concern regarding the floodplain on their property. And then there was also a letter from David Palumbo, and he was objecting to the city's noticing standards on that. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One sign up this evening, Stephen Stark.
Happy New Year, Mr. Stark. If you'll
Thank you.
please state your name and address.
Stephen Stark, I'm at 2630 East Amity Road. We live across the street and slightly to the east. Is it possible to put page 2 of my letter up on this? The way the plans are presently drawn, it'll increase the floodplain on our property. There's there's 2 pipes that are going onto our property and coming off our property. Both of those pipes are in the city of Meridian, and one's on AC Lane there, and the other one is on Amity, goes underneath Amity Road. So right now the plan is to increase the size of the culvert on Amity, but there's no reference to this other pipe replacement. So I drew circles around where, here's the one on the road on Amity. That's going to be increased to 9 by 18 feet. And then the one on AC Lane over there, off of our property, but you can see where our property would end up getting all the water. There's no plans written to increase the size of that pipe, and right now it's 40 inches. So we've had experience with this, dealing with FEMA, and it's a nightmare. We had to buy flood insurance. We had to work with, thankfully, David Mills of the city of Meridian helped us straighten it all out. And we got it straightened away, but we're close on the flood zone. So any tampering with it like that's it's gonna wreck us. So anyway, I talked with CK Engineering. I talked with Nampa Meridian Irrigation District. I talked with Ada County. I talked with Ada County Highway District. Everybody said the city of Meridian has the responsibility and the authority to protect the flood zone from being increased. So they all agree that the culvert downstream has to be changed. So I talked with Jason Corn, City of Meridian. He was very helpful, one of the most helpful people I talked to on this whole ordeal. And he told me that the final approval was his department's responsibility, but that there really wasn't a public process we could follow on. There's not anything that we could look at to see if it was being addressed or not. So I'm asking the city council to have some kind of plan process. I don't think the floodplain management should be something negotiated between me and the developer or anything like that. I think it should be an engineered process. It's a waterway. It's a natural waterway. And it should be something that is just taken care of. Matt did mention that he thought one idea would be to put a culvert across our property, but it's a natural waterway. You're not supposed to put culverts on natural waterways, and I don't want to lose access to our water, our creek. We take the grandkids down there, ducks and stuff like that. So I'm just asking the city council to establish a condition on the project that the base flood evaluations are to be established after the box culvert and the right-sized culvert are installed so that the flood plain is not increased. And we'd like a process in place that we can follow that assures that the floodplain is not increased on our property. So that's all I have.
Mr. Stark, just a question. So this is a Nampa Meridian Irrigation District area?
It is. The people we've always dealt with and the people that came out and cleaned it was Nampa Meridian
Okay,
Irrigation
and
District.
they're calling it a natural waterway?
No,
I thought I almost got it.
the staff's report called it a natural waterway. That's on page 8 of the staff report. Page 8, item Q, I think. Waterway, the 10-mile creek runs along the east side boundary. As a natural waterway, it's required to remain open as a natural amenity and should not be piped or otherwise covered and should be improved and protected with development in accordance with comprehensive plan. And in addition to that, though, we don't want to lose access to the water on our property. And in addition to that, a drainage doesn't flood, but a natural waterway does flood. So that's our understanding. We've been up and down this ladder a lot, and
I can imagine.
yeah, a drainage ditch doesn't flood. We have a ditch on the other side of our property. There's no flood zone on that, so on this waterway there is.
Okay, well, maybe if you can stay with us, Kyle, do you have some comments on what can happen here?
Madam Mayor, Jason and Dave kind of updated me on this. Our floodplain ordinance requires, this is an area that is an approximate, it's called an approximate A zone. It hasn't had a detailed study by a professional engineer yet using the HEC-RAS, the tools that give it base flood elevations. It's just kind of a blob on the map right now. The developer will need to do a detailed study in this case and submit it to Jason, the floodplain administrator, and it'll have to show the existing conditions and then proposed conditions, and so there will be out of the detailed study, there will be base flood elevations that will be determined, and the shape of the flood will likely change. Typically, on 10 Mile Creek, in all the other detailed studies that have been done, the floodplain has gone from a big blob to, oops, all the water really is in the channel. So generally, conditions have gotten better for everybody that lives near the creek with all the detailed studies. That being said, our ordinance says that the cumulative effect of any proposed development, when combined with all other existing and anticipated development, shall not increase the water surface elevation of the base flood more than 1 foot at any point. So the developer is going to have to do a detailed study, determine what the base flood elevations are all the way through, and then by our ordinance, he can't increase the base flood elevation by 1 foot at any one point. And that's up to the floodplain administrator to kind of allot that 1 foot. We generally don't allow somebody to say, oh yeah, we'll take our foot and, you know, we're going to increase the base flood elevation on the Starks property by a foot and it's okay. That's something that perhaps would be a point of discussion for the developer. Will they commit to, from existing to proposed, no change in the base flood elevation? However, you could end up with a situation where the detailed study determines that the flooding on the Starks property is really actually even worse than is shown on the approximate A zone. So, and then the solution may be to take out that culvert, but I'm not sure if that's the case, if the developer's responsibility is to improve the existing condition. Our ordinance requires them not to make the existing condition that much worse.
And that's what I'm interested in, is not making it worse, you know, because if you have a 40-inch pipe and a 40-inch pipe, and then you replace one with a 9-foot by 18-foot opening, it has potential to be a lot worse, you know. And it's and the long-term impact of selling a house in the flood zone or selling a house not in a flood zone is significant, along with flood insurance for the life of the mortgage.
And I guess what Kyle explained is by our ordinance, it cannot make that significant occurrence that you suggested happen. So they would have to show how they would mitigate that, and it could be taking that culvert out. So at this point, until we have the in-depth study on that, we can't give certain assurances other than our code says that that study has to show that it will not make a significant impact on your property and other adjoining properties.
So so the development won't go on if it increases the floodplain on our property then?
It would have to find a different solution.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's our assurance is it can't move forward without them showing how they would mitigate any impact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stark was the only sign up this evening.
Okay. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who would like to provide testimony on this item? Yes, please. Good evening and Happy New Year. If you'll please state your name and address.
Kathy Stark, 2630 East Amity Road. And I have just two concerns. Of course, the culvert is my main concern, flood. There is, I believe Matt Schultz is doing the property past us, the Wells property, and they are required to, I think they're putting in that same 9-foot by 14-foot culvert thing down the way from us. So that would, you know, put us in the middle of that smaller culvert. Anyway, you said it won't happen. I trust you.
Well, and
but I'm a little nervous because of all the development that's happened around us, and we've had to really babysit them doing what they say they'll do. So that does make me a little nervous, but.
Well, and I guess, Kyle, I saw you pull the microphone.
Madam Mayor, in anticipation, You know, yeah, like I said, it's possible that the detailed study's done and the flood location's actually worse than it is on the map now. But that's not going to be anybody's fault if it's existing conditions. The detailed study's done on existing conditions, and it shows up and it's actually worse than it's mapped now. That could happen. But I think maybe that's a discussion that you should be having with the developer to make sure that when this is done, if there's a flood condition that should be improved, let's find a way to improve it. And I think your concerns with that culvert there are legitimate. There could be a backwater there that would be affecting you now. You just don't know because you don't have a detailed study done.
That's interesting because from what we've talked to every person, they always say, and they could be wrong, that there's no way that should be in the flood zone, that it's been contained, it would be contained to the 10-mile creek, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? So am I understanding you correctly, saying that you think it could be actually worse?
No, I don't think that was the suggestion, but it could be because of what has gone on. All we can do is look at it as at an application by application basis. And so anything that's influenced that area outside this application, this application would show current conditions, and it could show that the flood zone had increased. Is that what you're suggesting?
Madam Mayor,
or it will show maybe a decrease.
Madam Mayor, I'm just saying that when you do a detailed study has not been done in this location. And when you do a detailed study, then you'll find out really where the water's going to go. Because nobody has done a hydraulic study based on survey of the topography around this area. That's all I'm saying. So you could end up with something that's for existing conditions that's worse than the map shows now. But our ordinance is saying that from whatever it is now to whatever it is after the developer's there, it's not going to get worse to the extent of 1 foot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other concern I have is for the step up in density. I know the comprehensive plan is in the middle of being reworked or whatever, but from my understanding, it's still going to be under 3.6 per acre for this area. So I'm quite concerned about the step up in density, especially, I know the schools in Meridian, in that area, we've had so much construction. I know the schools are overcrowded. So you're talking about, like, she said maybe potentially 700 more children going to Meridian schools, and that is a great concern. And with, areas to play, we live surrounded by Tuscany, and I've been to some meetings, and they all say, our kids play in the streets. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the kids are in the streets. And that's with disregard to the other developments that have been approved that are currently being built, such as the Wells and Castle Creek across the street in addition. So I would request and really desire that you would keep with the comprehensive plan and keep the zoning to R4. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there any further testimony? Matt, would you like to come forward with final comments? Answer questions?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Tammy. Matt Schultz, for the record again. Last issue first, about the schools. We did talk to the school district about, I think there was an old comp plan map that showed a school here, like on this property. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. He's like, no, we got Hill Century Farm. We don't want a school in this area. I said, okay, just making sure. So the school district has chimed in and thinks that they're about a mile away. We have Hill Century Farm is where we're at from this property school. So that's as far as the school district goes. School district thought we were covered. As far as density goes and where we're at 3.6, I feel like we're splitting hairs a little bit because, yeah, we got to ask for a step up, but we're just like, we're an inch step up. We're not, 10 feet step up. It's very minor. In fact, if we wanted to hold to all our four, for comparison, we'd have about 113 lots, and we have about 3.1 to the acre. So, 17 lots difference. So if it's a big deal for that 17, we think it is, and we think it's a big deal to be able to provide some diversity in product type, which tends to be sometimes lacking, I think. And I think it's good that we can do that all off the same amenity in the same location. As far as the flood zone goes, it's something that my career was started on engineering. I did a lot of flood zone work as an engineer, and the neighbor has every right to be concerned about hey, you're removing a little pipe that was the dam. Amity's kind of elevated. We've got a little pipe. Theoretically, in the 100-year event, which is very theoretical, there was over 300 cubic feet per second coming down the 10-mile creek. And so it can't fit through that 36-inch pipes. It all backs up at Amity. So to Kyle's point, the actual existing flood zone now is just kind of a broad brush that FEMA puts on there and says, if you want to change it, do a detailed study. So if we were to do a detailed study, because we've already done some preliminary work, it would actually get worse on us right now. And so that's why we called ACHD and say, hey, look, we want to build a culvert, similar to what we did with wells downstream. Let's get rid of this flood zone. Let's get it all contained in the ditch, which we know once you get rid of those blockages, it will be contained in the ditch. We're confident of that. But when you open up the dam on Amity, it just goes to another dam. If you can go back to that overall aerial that shows, don't touch anything. It's an interesting situation. There's a regional pathway right there that stops, that Tuscany put in today. There's an existing ditch access road that crosses a 36-ish inch culvert that, again, if we opened up this, it would just back up there. Now, would that worsen their condition? It certainly wouldn't make it better. I don't know if it'd worsen or not without a detailed study. So we committed at Planning and Zoning, and we're committing here again to work with the ditch company. It'll all run through Jason Korn. As far as what facility, we don't want to do 9x14 box culvert. We might do 2 parallel pipes, a little dip section, still allow that. And we're committing to extend the pathway, which really should have been this subdivision's problem, but he's long gone, long approved. And we think it's a benefit that we fix that culvert. We've already engaged Carl Gephardt with Resource Systems to do a final study to FEMA, which it should be all contained in that green area that you see there, straight on through. And right now it goes, it goes all the way up to their front door is where the flood zone is right now. And so we want to go in, as long as they cooperate with us, the Starks, on access, construction easements. ACHD will pay for an easement or pay for right of way. We just want to go build it. And when we initially talked to the Starks after P&Z, wasn't sure if the best idea was just to extend the culvert the whole way or to do it in 2 sections, but we've kind of come around, and we haven't communicated this to them yet. They'll be done in 2 different sections so that there would be some open water still in between the 2. So it wouldn't, totally be a covered up area for him. He says he likes to go down grandkids with the ducks or whatever, which is, and we don't want to build it the whole way. We just think it cost benefit, it's just better to do 2 different sections. So, but it will be to the full width of the 5-lane arterial. ACHD says they'll pay 90% of the Amity crossing as long as we do it to the full future 5-lane width, which takes them right away. And so as long as the Starks cooperate with us on that, we're willing to go in and fix it and make it better. And we'll commit to not raising the BFE and not changing the flood zone and reducing it. And we'll put that on the record and whatever else you want to do for us. But that's what we're going to do. So,
Mr. Burns.
So thanks, Matt. Just a couple questions just to confirm. So you're willing to, number one, you're willing to do a detailed study along with, FEMA, whoever else, to make sure that you're not going to raise the water in those sections. And number two, to confirm you're going to pay to mitigate or make sure that the two separate areas are sufficient for water use in that area.
Yes. Yes, we're willing to, Mayor and Councilmember, we're willing to do that, and the detailed study is very important, obviously, for us, because we've got a flood zone that's pretty big that we want to get rid of. Our neighbor over here, which we need right away from, she's got 6 acres of flood zone on her, and she's willing to cooperate with us on an easement. So we want to fix everything, is what we want to do, so.
Madam Mayor, so that's yes and a yes. Okay.
Other questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Matt, you mentioned conversation with the school district. That is my main concern. I think we've got 2 out of the 3 schools over capacity already. I believe Mountain View is the most over capacity high school in the state. You said you had a conversation with them. I thought I heard you say they're good with this.
Yeah. Well, they're good with it. In fact, he's not going to require a school site on our property. Now, does he say we shouldn't build? Is there a moratorium on building? That's a whole other issue about capacity and emergency bonds and all those things that school districts do often. But as far as him saying we need a school site on here, he said no.
Madam Mayor. Any commentary, though, about the overcapacity of the, specifically the high school, or that did not come up in conversation?
That was not part of the conversation, and I think their master plans of, they're always overcapacity, they're always passing bonds, as you know, every other year or so, and it's just, they kind of plan for it moving forward.
Madam Mayor, additional, thank you. Don't disagree with you that it seems our schools open up over capacity. But you're also well aware we've got a lot of growth in South Meridian with 1 high school, 1 middle school, and just a small handful of elementaries that are all over capacity. So I think I heard you saying that the step up isn't a deal breaker for you. And I just want to make sure that I'm hearing that correctly, and that maybe a reduction of 18 units you guys would be comfortable with.
We would not.
We
prefer to have what we propose. We think it's we think it's better to have the 17 more lots with some diversity than to have sameness R4. I mean, we think it's a benefit to the market.
Madam Mayor, just comment. It may be beneficial to diversity of housing. I don't subscribe that it's going to be 700 students to the neighborhood. But I also don't subscribe that the census average of 108 is too low. And that averages, if my math's right, 48 more kids at the elementary school that's 2 years old and over capacity, 24 at the middle school, and 30 at the high school. We hear day in and day out about the impacts on our schools. And I'm not real supportive of this application as presented. With that step up in density, I'd be more supportive if it was as it was lined out in the flume, for what it's worth.
If I may, Mayor and Council, I'm on the steering committee, but on a committee to the steering committee on the comp plan right now. And we use some round numbers like 3. Well, it's 3.49 and below, or is it 3.00? I mean, that's something to consider, because I think it should be 3.49 or below. We're using round numbers, and we get in these very exact numbers in our presentations, and where do we draw the line? And yes, we are above the 3.49 slightly, but I think that's important. And I think if you do away with step-ups in the future on the comp plan, we should go into some of these areas that are on arterials and arterials and plan some more medium or maybe up to 4 units to the acre, and get a little more detailed instead of showing all green, knowing that some it's going to be step-ups. If you decide to do away with the step-ups, I think some more detail needs to go into those areas. So that's just my suggestion moving forward.
And I guess Mountain View was one of the projects that was approved during the school district bond to add 20 new classrooms. So I would hope that that's going to alleviate some of the class overcrowding and classroom sizes. Other questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Byrne.
So to piggyback on the questions that Mr. Kavner asked, so if this body decides that, hypothetically, that these 17 extra units, or let me back up, if this body decides that we're going to stick with the flume and not approve a step up in density, would this be a deal breaker for this project?
I would have to confer with my owner.
Before we, Madam Mayor, one more follow-up. I just think it's important to have that discussion at least a little bit. Not that, I'm not saying, and this is all hypothetical, but before we close the public hearing and we start discussing this, I would want to have more clarity in regard to that before we close the public hearing. I'm sure Mr. Kavanagh and others would agree.
That's why I'm bringing it up now.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
my concern is that we make the decision on whether we're going to allow step-ups in certain areas when they get to council. I don't think that's the best way for council to be doing that. I mean, I've brought the question dozens of times that if we're going to make changes or if we're going to put a moratorium or any kind of restrictions on what we've done and what we allow, that we need to make that decision and start letting people know when projects are first applied for, not when they've spent a fortune and gone through all the process to get before us to this point. Just say thanks, but no thanks. I think that this, before us, we need to make the decision based on whether it's a quality project and whether it's what we would want there, assuming there was no issues with the school district at the moment. Because if that was what our concern was, we need to be letting the development community know that before they have a chance to file an application with us.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
Well, I agree with Councilman Palmer on this one, and though it's a step up, it's not much of a step up, and still under 4, 3.6 is still in the realm of where it was supposed to be. So I don't really think that's that big of an ask. I'm just still stuck on the playground.
Rachel, get your playground.
A playground over density.
Yeah. Well, with that much density, you need a playground.
Make a condition of approval, please.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Schultz? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
I move we close the public hearing on item 9B.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? I didn't think I heard all ayes. Because you did ask if for a response maybe from the client, and with a closed public hearing, you could not do that. So, any discussion?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
Maybe a question for Sonia under the outstanding issues for City Council. The second item there, was that discussed? All is well there to do that? I don't remember if I heard any concern about that from the applicant.
I didn't understand your question, Councilman Palmer.
Under the
Outstanding issues for council, the second item?
yes, was everybody ended up on the same page with that one? Or was all?
Yeah, the applicant's in agreement.
I thought you said that.
With the addition of a pathway.
Then with that, I move that we approve H 2018-0115 with everything that was discussed and not requiring the fence along the canal. Did I miss anything important?
Did you intend, excuse me, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, did you intend to include staff's outstanding issue we just discussed?
Correct.
Okay.
And approving the step up.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a second. Do we have discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Mylum.
the maker of the motion be willing to add a playground.
Madam Mayor,
The
Mr.
applicant is
Palmer.
okay with it.
there's a pool there. I mean, to me, that's a massive amenity that my subdivision doesn't have. We have tot lots galore. We don't have a pool. I would trade every one of those, and so would probably every kid in my neighborhood, to have a pool instead. I know my kids would.
Any other discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Kavner.
further comment. Appreciate the application. Appreciate the quality product. I think it's great for Meridian. I think I've made my opinion known. You get faced with the conversation about approving home or apartment after apartment in Meridian, and we continue to grow, but the impacts on our schools is really getting to a tipping point. And while I know that the bond will help alleviate some of that, we also continue to approve lots of applications that don't have step-ups in South Meridian. We continue to approve step-ups in North Meridian and Central Meridian, and just think that we've got to get to a point where we need to slow things down a little bit and let our school districts step up or catch up. I have no problem approving this with its previous density, which I can't approve the step up here tonight. So appreciate the commentary. Councilmember Palmer, I think that we as council members review each application as it comes forth each night and render our best decision. I don't think this is a case that we need to be communicating to the development community that we're not hearing applications. Quite frankly, I think it's business as usual. You've got a council that's going to evaluate each application on its own merit and render the decision that they think is best for what it's worth.
Okay, any further discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Burnt.
I go back and forth between the step up and not approving the step up. I think that in this case, I think that I think the step up is so relatively small. We're talking about a 0.5 percentage point. I understand that 17 units, and I think in this case, I would be in favor of this development with the step up included.
Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
No.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
No.
I'll break the tie with a no. And I will just, my tiebreaker was a no because we had a conversation with our community about step-ups and during a comprehensive plan update. So I think that it was suggested by the city that those would all be addressed on an individual basis, but it is a step up, and we are in the midst of a comprehensive plan, and we'll stay true to that. We're taking the step up out of the upcoming comprehensive plan, so that was telling. Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Yes, a question for staff. Is it preferable for staff that I'm intending to make a motion to approve this, but to reduce the preliminary plat to 112 building lots? Would you prefer that we continue it to allow an update to a preliminary plat before we move forward? Or are you comfortable with us approving it with that number this evening?
Madam Mayor, Councilman, what I heard you say was either a question of either approve it with the reduced number of lots or require them to revise the plat and bring it back.
Correct.
I would require them to revise it and bring it back, but I also might, suggest you ask the applicant if they're even interested. They might prefer a recommendation or a decision of denial. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's feasible for them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I bet that would require you opening the public hearing.
Here we go. All right, Madam Mayor, I want to be fair to the applicant. I move that we reopen the public hearing for item 9B.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to reopen the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Did I hear all ayes? Yes. Okay. This hearing is open and ask for the applicant's comments.
Thank you, Mayor Tammy. Matt Schultz for the record. Thank you, Councilman Cavanagh, for the opportunity to speak again. Get a second life sometimes. Appreciate that. No, I think that'd be good. I appreciate the opportunity to give us a chance to maybe continue before we a final decision on give us an opportunity to look at an all R4 preliminary plat. I don't know if 3.00 is your cutoff or not. Your staff has indicated that it's not. It's not the cutoff. You know, it's reasonable to submit something at 3.3 or 3.4 and still not be a step up, in their opinion. So I just want to throw that out there. You know, that I've gotten that from some top level staff that, you know, we use very round numbers in 1 to 3 and, you know, 3 to 8, you know, and things like that. But when we get down to it, yes. So, I mean, R8 is considered a medium density, so we would have to go back to R4. But we would ask for a little bit of flexibility on that, you know, 3.00. Just, you know, look at our amenities and things like that. We love the area. It's great, you know, upscale part of the town. We're excited to be in it, and we do not want to throw it away over this issue. We do appreciate the chance to reevaluate it and potentially resubmit. So I appreciate that if you would vote for that.
Madam Mayor. Matt, how much time you need? 2 weeks, a month?
30 days would be great.
30 days? Okay.
Yeah.
On the calendar. Okay, great. Thank you.
How much time does the staff need?
Prior to the hearing, preferably, at least.
So a month and at minimum 2 weeks.
Is this substantial enough that it would need to go back to planning and zoning, Mr. Neary?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I mean, it doesn't sound to me from what they're talking about that it'd be that substantial. That certainly is the council's prerogative to remand it. That would put it out a few more months rather than weeks, but it doesn't sound that significant. We're talking about all R4, not just density, but R4 dimensions. I don't know, he talked about losing 13 lots. I guess in my opinion, that's not significant enough to remand. You could certainly give it enough time just to provide it.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
I think a valid question for staff. 5th, 19th, is February 5th too soon for you all? I prefer to not continue it to the 19th, but I also recognize that our planning department has a significant amount of projects on their plate.
I think it has to be the 19th.
Madam Mayor, it depends on how long it will take the applicant to get us revised plans. Like I said, we need them at least 10 days prior to the hearing date. So if they can turn it around and get it to us quickly, he's nodding that they can, then February 5th would be fine.
Great, thank you, everyone. Anyone else needs to testify before I close the public hearing?
You don't want to close the public hearing.
We're continuing.
Oh, that's right, we're going to continue it.
Yes.
Right. Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Unless there's anyone else here that wants to testify tonight, I would move that we continue item 9B, H-2018-0115 to February 5th, 2019.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to continue this public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes. Okay. Thank you. So the Starks, you know what just happened, right? This application will be continued to February 5th, and with most likely a new plat that will be submitted that you'll have an opportunity to review. Okay, item 9C is a public hearing for H 2018-0091. I will open this public hearing with staff comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Next application on the agenda this evening is the Rockberry Townhomes. The applications before you this evening is a preliminary plat, and the applicants also applied for director's approval of a private street to provide internal access to this proposed development. The site consists in the audio description, we had mentioned that the project site was approximately 6.23 acres in size, but it's actually 5.83 acres in size, so it's less than what's depicted on the project description. So that does affect some of the density for the proposed development that I'll go into in my presentation. So as I mentioned to you, the site consists of 5.83 acres of land, currently zoned R15 in the city, and it's located at 4373 West Treecrest Drive in Meridian, Idaho. In 2006, this property was annexed in as part of the Tree Farm annexation. Recent applications came before this body in 2007 as the Rockberry subdivision, which it was a two-lot subdivision. One was the CN portion here that you see that's going to develop with a church. And this was a larger parcel, an R15 parcel that was to come back later and further subdivide to have a residential development that you could look at. And that's why we're here this evening. I'd also mention to the council that the recorded development agreement for this particular project does call for townhomes, multifamily, or either condominiums on this particular property. So the applicant is proposing to construct 47 townhomes on this site, consistent with the proposed development agreement. I'd also mention to you that the comprehensive plan for this particular project is medium density residential, and as you're aware, that's a density range between 3 and 8 dwelling units to the acre. The proposed project before you this evening is at the higher end of the register. It comes in right at 8 dwelling units to the acre with the number of building lots that they're proposing this evening. So again, the applicant is proposing 47 lots and 8 common lots. Gross density is 8 dwelling units to the acre, as I mentioned, which is within that target density of 3 to 8. Minimum property size is 22,603 square feet with an average lot size of 3,527 square feet. And because this is an R15 development, all of the proposed lots comply with the minimum 2,000 square foot lot size minimum for that particular district. So this plat does conform to those regulations. I'd mention to you that the plan that's before you this evening has been modified slightly based on what transpired at the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the commission had concerns with the amount of guest parking because this is a gated community that's being proposed this evening. The roads are narrower than what's allowed for a public street, so parking was an issue that was raised by our fire department. So the commission had a condition that they add 10 parking stalls for guests parking, and they have provided that, and that's before you this evening. So that condition has been modified, and the plans have been changed to reflect that change as well. That also slightly modified the proposed open space for the development because some of it went to make way for the additional parking on the site. But as I mentioned to you, because the acreage of the plat is slightly less than what was on the project description, there aren't any concerns with this project still meeting the minimum open space requirements for this particular project, the 10% minimum. So as I mentioned to you, this is a private street that they applied for. There will be a gate for an entrance on the east boundary here for access into the development, and then a northern access off a collector road here. This one is proposed to be an emergency access only because of this street being designated a collector. When we met with the applicant, typically we don't allow private streets for single-family type developments of this nature, but we worked with ACHD and the applicant. We decided that these streets only provide access to this particular development. So in this case, public streets don't really provide a benefit to this development. So staff is amenable, and the director was amenable to allow this to move forward with a private street application, a gated private street application. Now we'll get into the open space. Because this is over a 5-acre minimum, the code does require that the applicant provide 10% open space and one side amenity. The applicant is slightly above the minimum 10% at 11%, and the primary amenity is going to be a clubhouse, which is located here. If you can see my cursor which is which is located on the central open space surrounded by the townhome units. So the open space and the amenity does comply with the minimum of the UDC. Fencing for this development is required to comply with the UDC standards as well. The applicant did provide some conceptual elevations for you this evening. Some of the concerns from the neighbor during the public hearing was the fact that these units may not seem to appear to fit on some of the lot sizes that they're proposing. So that was discussed. But I would mention, because these are townhomes and attached units, all of the proposed elevations have to go through the design review process. So the applicant will have to provide those details to us to ensure that these, one, meet our architectural standards, but two, also fit on the lots and meet our setbacks. The Planning and Zoning Commission, I did have a couple other renderings for you. So the applicant did provide some color renderings of the gate detail as you come off the east. And this is how it kind of fits in with the surrounding community. Now, this is quite a bit denser than what's currently developed in the area. But again, as I mentioned to you earlier in my presentation, that does comply with the recorded development agreement for this particular property. Here's some renderings of the proposed elevations again. And then here's a perspective view of the plaza area water feature and the proposed clubhouse here. That's, again, internal to the proposed development. And the applicant also has interconnected pathways that tie into the church and the adjacent streets for interconnectivity to the adjacent roadways as well. One thing that was discussed at the Planning and Zoning Commission was the pedestrian internal access, the internal connectivity, whether or not, typically with a private street, we don't require sidewalks. It's not a code requirement. That's something that we had recommended as staff, but Planning and Zoning Commission kind of took that requirement, removed that requirement for the fact that the applicant actually proposed permeable pavers as part of the roadway system. So these roads will all be a minimum of 25 to 27 feet wide, and then 5 feet of it will be this permeable paver, which acts as a demarcated pedestrian walkway within the development. So we're good with some of that connectivity here, and the drive aisle should still be a minimum of 20 feet to get cars going down both sides of the road and still meet our fire department concerns for access into the site. So testifying in favor at the public hearing, we had Michael Nye and Pete Rockwell. No one testified in opposition. We had 3 residents comment on the application, and no written testimony was submitted. Key issues, as I mentioned to you, some of the neighbors were concerned that the elevations didn't blend in with the community and didn't appear to fit on the proposed lot sizes. And then some of the neighbors, there have been some traffic issues out there, particularly that intersection at Tree Farm and Chinden is over capacity with the number of developments that have come in. And what's going to relieve that is a Black Cat exit to Chinden, and that's currently under construction. So a lot of that will be alleviated once that intersection is completed and that access is complete, which I believe it's constructed currently, and that was a requirement of previous developments as well. So ACHD did not require a traffic study with this particular development. Key issues of discussion by the commission was the guest parking, which I alluded to in my presentation. That has been remedied per the commission recommendation. And then commission was, because of the R15 district, they were concerned of the 3-foot setback between the structures, so a total of 6 feet between each structure. So this is going to be a pretty compact development in that particular area. So that was something that was discussed as well. So as far as outstanding issues this evening, there are none for the council. I did look on the public record and I did not see any additional public testimony was provided for this particular application after the Planning and Zoning Commission. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and stand for any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Bill. Council, any questions at this time?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Bill, just for clarification then, proposed gate at both Tree Crest and Tree Haven Way?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is correct. One will be emergency access and one will be the main entrance.
Yes, great. Thanks.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
I just have a question, kind of more of a general question, Bill, and it's regarding a tot lot. And the question, though, is staff recommended one on the last application, but not on this application. Is that because of the number of homes or the type of development? What would be the reason? They had enough amenities, technically, right?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this application is a little bit different. This is really a preliminary plat. So we can't
do that.
It's not like a rezone or development agreement modification where you can require something a little bit more. Now, if you feel a clubhouse, a top lot is better than a clubhouse, that's a discussion you can have with an applicant. But I think their demographics probably going to be a little different than a family locating here, but I could be wrong. But maybe they can share some of their vision of the project with you as they get into their presentation. But that's our understanding. It's geared towards the more 55 and older, and so that's why they thought the clubhouse was the better amenity, and we did as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, anything further? Okay, is the applicant representative here?
John Brecken, Brecken Land Design, 6661 Glenwood Street, Garden City.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill, for the very concise presentation. Much appreciated. Since P&Z approval, we've been working with staff to make sure that we comply with all the site-specific conditions of approval. Some of those items that I'd like to point out, which are depicted on this plan, are the addition of a 4-foot wide sidewalk that wraps the interior island area there. We've also added the on-site parking to allow visitor parking, and provided clarification of the clubhouse, and that it is indeed a clubhouse, and we'll have restrooms as well as kitchen. The plaza area there is to be a nice amenity as well, with a water feature. And then the open space area in the center does meet the qualified square footage requirements for open space. We've also made some or shifted the lots around in order to provide pedestrian connection through the center, and allow that connectivity to the south and to the north. And then we're also, taking into consideration the landscape buffer that's being provided on the south as part of the church project. So those will dovetail, work together. There has been some ongoing, since we started working on this project, conversation about traffic flow, and that whole area there is developing very rapidly, and trying to accommodate that. So at this point, Black Cat is complete, and so that some of the previous concerns about Tree Haven being over or being a congestion point are not valid as they were previously. Other items that we plan to add into the plaza area would be benches. There's trees with tree grates, and so that's it's all supposed to be look very nice and cohesive, and work together from a design standpoint, and to be overall pedestrian friendly. And so that was some of the thought process that we put into this, incorporating the permeable pavers through the traffic way, and making it more of a pedestrian area. There is no parking allowed on the streets. I stand for questions.
Thank you, John. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Burnt.
One question. Thank you, Mr. Brecken. Look, the elevations look a little bit different from the original rendering to the color rendering. I really liked the original rendering. The color renderings look completely different. So what's it going to look like? They're not even remotely close.
Well, I am probably not the best person to field that question. I know we, in our previous concept, I think it was over a year ago, it was substantially different, and there were some issues with building setbacks and where the property lines lie and so forth, and that drove much of the redesign in order to meet all the code requirements. Okay. I also know that what is portrayed is conceptual to some degree, right. And so that's why color choices have not been selected, and each one of these buildings will again have to come in for approval, design review.
Madam Mayor, follow up. Not necessarily concerned about the color per se, just like the difference in elevation. Having them look not so vanilla across the board. Have them, the elevations look exactly the same. The original rendering, it looked quite a bit different. For example, you have a lot of different variation in the original rendering. They look completely different, and I like it a lot.
Okay.
What you're proposing now looks exactly the same, pretty much across the board. So I was wondering, what's it going to look like?
Yes, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor.
Hi, Michael.
How you doing, Council? The original drawings, what you see in...
Michael, will you state your name and address?
My name is Michael Nye, and my address is 904 Madrid Avenue, Torrance, California, 90501. What you're seeing here, you see what I'm seeing?
Yeah.
This is our second round of design for the project. The first round that shows the gate and the elevations was purely conceptual. Right. We had developed that for a neighborhood meeting as we were beginning the process. Okay. So that was about 18 months ago. And subsequent to that, we have further refined the elevations and design of the project. Now, we understand that with this many units, there needs to be variety in the project, right. Both of elevation, color, setbacks, variety of materials. And so that's being in process right now. If you want, we can have our architect detail a little bit more about that. But what you see here in this elevation is more refined of what the product it will ultimately end up being like. So it's very much different than what the original was. So that's why you're seeing that different in elevations and colors and setbacks.
Madam Mayor, so am I looking at what it's going to? So what you're saying is what we're looking at right now is not what it's going to look like.
Yeah. So if you look at the color renderings over here to the right, that is more depictive of what the end product will be.
Okay.
Versus the one that showed the entry. Those were just kind of block.
Right.
It was more of just here we're going to have a gated entry. We're going to have units. Even the center courtyard looks much different from that design to what we finally ended up with here at the end. So,
Madam Mayor. Oh, sorry, Mr. Bird.
One sec. So, Madam Mayor, follow. So what I'm looking at on the right is going to be more depictive of what it's going to look like, not
yes.
necessarily what's on the left.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kavner.
I think I'm somewhat dovetailing on Councilmember Bernst's questions. Michael, help me understand. I know that I think the renderings changed from the neighborhood meeting to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Are these further refinements, or are these renderings that we're seeing here the same ones that were presented at that Planning and Zoning?
What you're seeing here was the ones from Planning and Zoning,
okay,
yes.
Great.
So we've submitted these same ones to them. Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
There was only one sign up this evening. Jane Albert signed up, but I don't see Miss Albert. No, that was the only sign up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Denise?
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Denise Lefevre. I'm at 6706 North Salvia Way. And I'm opposed to this as designed. First of all, I'd like to put it on record that I did attend the neighborhood meeting, And with the rest of my neighbors, we had lots of questions, and they were unable to answer the questions. And when point blank asked, you know, why are you going through this if you're not ready to answer the questions, we were told we're just checking a box. Well, part of what zoning is about is working with the neighbors to get a plan that works and that is compatible with the neighbors. This still fails to meet the compatibility, as you can guess, because one of the areas that we're concerned about is the elevations. We have rocks, we have bricks, we have river tones throughout our community. We have a nice neighborhood, and we want to keep it that way. And there's nothing wrong with having a nice neighborhood in the Meridian area. We don't need Swiss cheese everywhere.
Right.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. And with that said, we've asked them, and Scott, when they did the church, was great. I didn't get a chance to work with him, but that's how I met all of my neighbors the first time I sat here, was from that meeting. And he was absolutely fantastic to work with. This developer here hasn't come to the table and hasn't worked with our neighbors to go back through. You know, Jane isn't here. Jane gave me her notes. She was concerned about parking. She's concerned about the elevation. You know, there was concerns about amenities, lack of. There's concerns about open space. Spur Wing, one of the things that's touted about the Spur Wing family and neighborhoods is the amount of open space throughout that community. There's beautiful walking trails, beautiful open space. Here's this development coming in that will be utilizing our space, isn't part of our HOA, but will be relying on that beautiful neighborhood without actually contributing, and they don't have enough open space within their area. It just barely meets it. It's not compatible. It's very dense. It's too complex. You know, the colors and the variations just don't cut it. You know, they were concerned about the traffic as well. We have even though the Black Cat is there, the light isn't developed, and the church is going to be there, which is going to put a heavy demand on traffic when that one gets developed. One of the other things when I went through and I looked at the staff report, maybe it's in there somewhere, but I don't see where there's anything to address. How are they going to address upkeep of the painting and the roofs and all of that stuff? You know, we're really concerned that they have an HOA that speaks to the open space and maintaining the open space, but what about to make sure that once they put it in there, you don't have somebody painting it pink and somebody painting it orange or whatever colors they choose to do, that there's some consistency among these townhouses. We like our neighborhood. I like my neighborhood, and I want to keep the quality in our neighborhood. So I ask you to either go back through and have them send it back and give us some good elevations to look at, or flat out deny it.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Byrd.
Denise, I would have been completely shocked if you hadn't come up and testified for this one.
Against this one?
No, for this one, not
For this
for
one?
yeah. So I'm glad you're here. I have some questions for you. So you said that you asked some questions that weren't answered. What were those questions that you asked that weren't answered?
We asked for in the very beginning about elevations and coloring. The original renderings were like a black and white. That doesn't really flow and blend with our neighborhood. You know, we asked other questions about, you know, different amenities, parking, you know, how they're going to handle that. They weren't answered. You know, part of what this whole process is and going through this process I've learned is there's a breakdown with the neighborhood meetings. I think if we actually get on step and we actually have neighborhoods become more meaningful and work together and are able to develop something like what Scott did and we had more meaningful neighborhoods, it'd be better. And so it just needs to have some improvements.
Madam Mayor, follow-up. So looking at the elevations that I saw, and I agree with you 100%, Denise, that the color renderings were a little bit vanilla. I mean, I think that maybe they were placeholders as opposed to an actual representation of what those elevations would be. But looking at the right, what part of those renderings or those elevations are you not in favor of?
One, the colorings on it, you know, white doesn't really blend in with our neighborhood. We have to have one house over in that area that's white and gray. But I walked around that whole neighborhood because I wanted to understand what I didn't like about it. And I walked around the neighborhood, and we typically have 3 color sources throughout our neighborhood. And bricks, rocks are all present. This one over here on the other side that was the white looking one, I believe they had some brickwork or whatever. I'm not seeing any brickwork, rock work. You know, we just want it to blend. Even the spur wing heights that went in, they blend. You know, I know that the neighbors weren't a favor of that one because of the size of the lots, but that actually looks really nice.
Anything further? Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to provide testimony on this item? Yes, sir.
This, yes, but not that.
Happy New Year. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Mark Giorso, 4329 West Greenspire. We moved into our home about 6 months ago, and to be honest with you, we knew there was a church that was likely going to be going in. We did not know about the development at the time, and I'm sure if I'd questioned a few more of the neighbors, we would have found that out. But either way, the conceptual isn't right here, but if you look at the plat map, the Tree Crest Way right here backs up to our subdivision right behind it there. And I'm concerned, I think, as I look at this a little bit closer now, with the setback just off of Tree Crest there. It seems like it's, you know, if we're in our backyard there, we're looking across a street, and then there's two-story townhomes that are looking down into our backyard. So it would appear to me, and again, the density is part of this issue, but that there has to be a way maybe to give a little more privacy to those of us in those 12 or so homes that are on Greenspire. They're going to be having neighbors look down into our backyard that we had not planned on initially, I think, when we bought our home. So I guess that, the density, the setback, and as the woman before me just mentioned, the elevations are of great concern to us as we look at that. So again, I think a little more discussion with the neighborhood, and it I think would be appropriate, and I think well deserved by the neighbors that are there. So that's it. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Mr. Orso, I had a question. Appreciate your testimony. Help me understand. Maybe I was confused. Does your neighborhood sit below Tree Crest Way?
Greenspire is right there. So if you look at glasses on right there in that little cul-de-sac on the left, right here. Yeah, that's we're right in there, just to the right. 4329 or 4329 is our address. So we would be looking right back at those across that little road there, Tree Crest, I guess. And they would be looking back into our neighborhood. So it's not that it's elevated above us, unless we're talking the second floor, right?
Sure.
And it just looks like it's a very small setback from the road there.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Orso, you mentioned better engagement with the neighbors, which is something I think that we as a council really support. What are those items that you would hope to be addressed?
Density, elevation, but the setback primarily. Having more of a setback off of Tree Crest there would be desirable, highly desirable for those of us that live in those 8 or 9 homes right there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any other testimony? Okay. Would the applicant like to come up and have final comments?
Madam Mayor, I do have a question for the
Ms.
applicant. As you've heard brought up several times today. So is this, and I guess staff didn't really have the exact answer, same kind of question that I asked them, is this a senior living development, or is there a reason that you didn't put in some form of play structure?
It's not a senior living development, but the demographic of what we are looked at in our pro forma is older, retired people that want a place that is secure, that they can, it's a lock and leave it development, so they can lock their home, it's fully maintained. so they can leave. It's got secure perimeter. They can just leave their facility or their home and go travel, whatever they would like to do. So it lends itself more toward retired people or people that just like to travel, professional people that don't have time or desire to maintain a facility. They will all be taken care of for them. So when we looked at that demographic in full, and granted we've got 47 units, not a big demand, but we have provided a very attractive interior place for kids if they want to play, if there are kids that end up being there. We've got a clubhouse, we've got fountains, we've got a big grassy area entry, place for the kids to ride their bike, plus it's got full access out of the development on all four sides, east, north, south, and west, that they can get out onto nice grass areas, nice access areas that go across the street to the swimming pool, to go down to the clubhouse, have dinner, whatever it is, they have good access to do that. So, in response to some of the concerns, we realize that when our project gets approved and we go to ask for building permits, that we will have a design review process. We're not designing something that will not be complementary and will not fit within the community. So some of the colors and the elevations directly to the east of us, there's 5 or 6 homes that surround the swimming pool area that don't have any brick at all. They don't have any stone on them. They're just basically siding. But that's not what we want for our development. So we will have a combination of stone, brick, stucco, wood. So it'll be a nice mix of the style for the homes. So in regards to the no HOA, we have had communications with the Spring Greens HOA, and Joy Jones is here. They can talk a little bit further about that if you'd like to talk to her. So we are in discussions with them. We'd be a little further into discussions, but there are several entities that are a part of the Spring Greens HOA that they're trying to meld the different developments together. There's some contradictory language between the different development agreements or the HOA agreements, so they're working on that. It is our desire and our plan to be a part of that, master HOA development, so that the exteriors are maintained. We have to maintain the roads as they are private roads. So, and the fact that this is a fully maintained development, so landscaping, exteriors, roof lines, paint, that's all maintained as part of the HOA. It does meet the current zoning requirements. We have allowed for a larger open space than what's required, and we have worked with the church and the design of the surrounding pathways and access points to allow people to have open access to all of that, especially pedestrian and bike access. We talked a little bit about upkeep. We will blend in. The setback off of the road, the Tree Crest Way, the development to the north of us is fully fenced. So there's no direct openness to the street or to our development. And so our 2-story units would be no different looking into somebody's backyard across the way. It'd actually be less than their neighbors that have 2-story homes with open grate fencing. So it's open metal fencing. So I think with as far as visual impact of that, it will be probably even less than what some of the current view is from the other homes. And we have allowed for additional parking, and yeah, so that's all.
Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Burnt.
Thank you, Mr. Nye. Just one quick question. You mentioned that, you haven't started the design process, and I totally understand why at this phase of your application, why that wouldn't be the case. But going forward, would you be open to involving some concerned neighbors in that design process? Not necessarily just to take their input, trying to be a good neighbor to them, and would you be opposed to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the latest pictures that we showed you of the design, those were submitted, were actually shown at our last neighborhood meeting. Okay. So we've had several meetings, and because of the longevity of this project, we've had to redo some of the meetings, which we're fine. We're happy to do.
Okay.
We want to be good neighbors, right. And so we just want to assure the council that what we're designing here fits in Spur Wing Greens. It fits the design, it fits the feel. The finishes will be a high-end finish, so it'll be very nice and will look very nice from any, because we're out in the middle, we'll have four-sided architecture that isn't just nice in the front, but it's nice all the way around, because we will be open to the public.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Tonight, in your testimony, I think you said that you're working with the Spur Wing Greens HOA, and that maybe there's someone here that's representing them. And she doesn't have to get up and introduce herself and testify. Maybe we can avoid that. I see you being hesitant. But my assumption is one of those conditions of joining the HOA is that your development would have to adhere to the same architectural standards as the Spur Wing Greens neighborhood.
Yeah, we will be a sub-HOA to the master HOA there. So because we have different requirements than the other houses that are around us, for one, we have to maintain our private roads. We have more landscaping requirements for maintenance, the outside of the building. So we're part of it, or we would be part of it, but we also have to maintain it differently because of the demands and requirements of the development. So,
right. Madam Mayor, one additional question, if I may. Appreciate Councilman Milam's concern about a tot lot. I don't necessarily share that same concern, but what I do share is the concern I think that was shared by the public about your residents accessing kind of private open space. And we see that a lot with lots of applications, but I can appreciate the added concern from the Spur Wing residents. And I saw one of the slides showed kind of the pathway access from your neighborhood kind of out to the street. And yes. I don't know if staff can pull that out. Oh, it's actually up here. I assume that pathway takes you to Tree Crest, and there aren't any other pathways that would take your residents into Spur Wing. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is making this kind of the path of least resistance, should you not join the HOA, to alleviate the Spur Wing homeowners that the amenities that they're paying for are being used only by the residents and not from people from within your neighborhood. So can you comment a little bit on that and maybe show us, kind of articulate where people would have to go?
Yes, absolutely. This portion of land has a benefit of it in that whoever buys one of these units will have a lifestyle membership at Spur Wing Country Club. So they are a part of Spur Wing. They will be a part of that. They're putting their money into it. They're contributing to that. So they're not taking anything away from it. Okay. And they're not using anything that they don't have the benefit of using. So,
Madam Mayor, just thank you for providing that clarity.
Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, Councilman Milam, and Councilman Cavanagh, and maybe this will help as well. According to Google, the site is a 3-minute bike ride and 11-minute walk to Keithbird Park, and a 6-minute bike ride and a 19-minute walk to Heroes Park. So there's massive publicly funded amenities in a very short distance from the site.
Put that on the record.
Okay. Is there any further questions for the applicant?
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question or remark, it looks like. Council willing to hear second time? Yeah. Good evening.
Denise Lefevre, 6706 North Salvia Way. Since Ty testified that there's parks close by and Googled it, right across the street is one big open green space. And that little walkway goes to that one big open green space. Not only that, there are multiple trails throughout this whole entire area. And second, the club lifestyle membership is a private membership to the clubhouse, and the golf course has nothing to do with our amenities throughout our neighborhood.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Question for Denise. Denise, are the streets and sidewalks in your neighborhood, are those privately owned, or are those public streets and sidewalks?
They're kind of a little bit different. They're ACHD right-of-ways that all the neighbors get to maintain.
Madam Mayor, follow up. So the neighborhood pays for the maintenance on the streets and sidewalk?
No, they're public streets.
Okay.
Yeah. But the pathways and throughout the whole entire neighborhoods, those are spur wings. And there's a lot of green space. That's what makes this area so desirable.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you. Since the applicant always gets the last word, any final comments? Okay. Council, any other questions for the applicant, staff, or? Is the public hearing portion closed? It's still open, yes. If you'd like to come forward.
I would like to clarify.
If you'll please state your name, yes.
Sorry,
And
Joye Jones.
can you pull that? Yeah.
Let me
You
try
can
that.
pull it down.
Thank you.
Yes.
Joy Jones, Joye Jones, and I represent the Spurwing Greens HOA, both the Master Association and the two sub-associations. So just a couple of clarifications. The members of the board could not be here this evening as they are going through some document review, so they were in a previously scheduled meeting. I did want to clarify a couple of things, and that is Spurwing Greens is separate from Spurwing, as I know you're aware, but this parcel does have, as Mr. Nye mentioned, it does have access to the club as far as a membership opportunity that was grandfathered in the development agreement and the purchase of that property. However, the access to it, if it is through those private and privately maintained parcels, would need to have some other sort of agreement because they wouldn't be paying into the Spurwing Greens Master Association HOA, although they have made application. The other thing was Mr. Nye mentioned that the pool, the community pool, that they would have access to that. And again, that would only come with the agreement to be a part of the Master Association. However, the club facility obviously has the fitness facility and it has the swimming pool and all of that. So a little bit of differentiation there, and I just wanted to make sure that we clarified that that approval has not been, actually it hasn't been formally requested, let alone weighed, simply because we didn't really have a project that the board could weigh access to, allowing them access to. And then to Denise's point of a couple color schemes, there are 6 approved exterior colors, along with about 12 approved trim colors for Spurwing Greens. So to be harmonious, it would need to most likely be in that color scheme, if that's helpful.
And it does sound like the applicant agreed to coordinate with your color schemes and
correct.
And
what was
accents.
presented to us, because he did come to Century Management, or did send in a proposal asking that for the management of it, which is totally separate from the Master Association, but for us to look at the potential for that, which would probably include some oversight or some color scheme palettes and all in the development so that we could make sure that it met the criteria, much as we do for the rest of the subdivision.
So as Mr. Burnt had suggested in working with the neighbors, it would work with your design committee, or?
It would need to if it was going to be part of the Master Association, yes.
Okay.
Madam Madam Mayor, follow up from your question.
Mr. Burnt?
Any concerns in what was proposed to you by Mr. Nye?
That's not my place to speak to. The board would need to do that. I just wanted to clarify a couple things because I know the whole spur wing and spur wing greens and access and membership get really confusing. That was it.
And I think that only access is the gate between spur wing greens and spur wing. Is that what I
No,
understand?
if you actually, in looking at this map with the, sorry, let me orient myself for a moment. So coming out of this piece, coming out of Tree Haven Way, there we go, the access to the club, which actually sits over here, would most likely be through those common pathways that the Master Association owns, especially if they were walking or biking, if they weren't using the public roadways. So there's obviously some advantage and some disadvantage to adding yet another development and some complexity to it. But again, that's not my place to state. The board would make the decision on that with the input of the homeowners, I believe. Does that help?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, again, Mr. Nye will allow you the last word if you have anything further you would like to add. Okay. Council, any other questions? Okay, if there's nothing further, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Burns.
I move that we close the public hearing 9C H-2018-0091.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes.
Bless you.
Madam Mayor?
That was a good one. Our fans watching at home.
Mr. Burt.
Generally speaking, I'm in agreement with. I really like this development, this application. One of the reasons why I like it is because of the diversity of housing. You know, I like the fact that, the flume actually calls for this type of diversity in this section of the area, and so I enjoy that. The design. I have no doubt that Mr. Nye and his team are going to work hand in hand with a potential partnership with the Spur Wing Greens or whatever HOA. I have no doubt that Mr. Nye is not going to do what he said in regard to working with neighbors, regarded with design. I know that he will. I've never seen a developer testify in the public record that he is going to and then doesn't. So I have no reason to believe that Mr. Dye is going to be any different. I'm also, and I hate to bring up social media, but anyone that knows me understands that I'm a huge believer in community. I think this is a really big deal. And in my neighborhood where I live, I frequently, during summer times and spring times and fall time, when my wife and I are on walks, meet and talk with neighbors from the Green Hill subdivision all the time. They walk in our subdivision, they use our pathways, and they're great. I think that forms a bond within the community, and I think that's fantastic. I don't see why it's a big deal at all that members of your community are walking on your roadways or your sidewalks or your pathways in a legal manner and not breaking the law and are respectful. I think that's what creates community, and I believe that's the Meridian way. That's who we are as a community. We're inclusive in all that we do, and I believe. I just strongly believe that I think that we should be, open to neighbors and being respectful to neighbors, as long as they're respectful to, personal property. I don't see why there's any concern at all about people walking in amongst the neighborhoods in a respectful manner, getting to know one another. So generally speaking, I'm definitely in agreement with this application. I think it's going to be a great addition to your subdivision.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
I concur. I think it's meetings like this why I value the public testimony piece. When you read this on paper, I had some real concerns, specifically related to the elevations. I appreciate the applicant coming here and really providing some context along that. So I'm supportive. It sounds like you're doing it, but I really encourage affiliating with the Homeowners Association. I think that alleviates a lot of perceived concerns from people. But I think that to Councilmember Burnt's point, this is just another piece of offering a unique piece of diverse housing in Meridian. I don't think you're going to have any issues getting these things sold. I think there's a high demand for this type of stuff, and excited to see it come to our community.
Any other comment?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Burnt.
I move that we approve 9C, Rockberry Townhomes H-2018-0091.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Okay, item 9D is under our Anti-Drug Coalition and a budget amendment to present.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I am here to request spending authority for 2 budget amendments relating to the Meridian Anti-Drug Coalition. That's action items D and E. Would you like me to present? You have all the information corresponding in the packet for tonight's meeting.
Yes, please.
Does anybody have any questions? Would you like those to be separate or together?
Separate items, I think, agenda.
I will answer you.
Okay.
You can present those separately, but all at the same time. They will have questions. They will also approve it on a separate motion.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So the first one is a grant awarded through Idaho Office of Drug Policy and the Success for Law Enforcement grant. And the request was granted to have $3,813.68 to complete compliance checks and shoulder taps that the Meridian Anti-Drug Coalition carries out twice yearly.
Any question on that? Mr. Kavanagh.
Kendall, I think the number you shared is different than the number that's in front of us.
My apologies. I was
Okay, I
looking
just
at
wanna
the
make sure
letter
we're-
that was attached.
And the letter from ODP says $3,813.68.
Correct, and I see that on the budget amendment form, it is 3,814.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I thought I heard you say 6,000. Maybe I misheard you. I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, never mind then.
Okay.
Any other questions on that?
Okay. And the second budget, are we finished with that one? Sorry, this is a new process to me.
Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, I move we approve the budget amendment in amount not to exceed $3,814, which is item 90.
We have a motion and several seconds. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
All ayes. Second budget amendment.
Correct, thank you. The Idaho State Liquor Division grant, not to exceed $4,700, and that was awarded to complete an additional compliance check and shoulder tap operation, as well as 3 Red Ribbon Week presentations speaking to alcohol abuse and DUIs presented by Natalie Marty. We'll do that at the largest high schools during Red Ribbon Week of 2019. Any questions?
Isn't that in a new budget year, though? Isn't that in October?
It's April.
So the grant amounts were not known during the budget planning process, and so the Idaho State Liquor Division grant, look at my notes here. They will be expenses that will be incurred during fiscal year 19, so it'll be in October.
Okay, so that the expenses are incurred before the next budget year.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Palmer?
Mayor, I move we approve item 9E, the budget amendment in an amount not to exceed $4,700.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve item 9E. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
All ayes. Thank you, Kendall.
Thank you.
Thanks for your great work, Kendall.
Hanging
Thank
out.
you, Kendall. Appreciate you.
Thanks for sticking with us.
9F is also under our police department.
Good evening, Madam Mayor,
Good
members of
evening.
the council. I'm here to present, in regards to a budget amendment for the Idaho Humane Society animal contract. The amendment is to not exceed $9,528 to finish out the fiscal year of 19. And I guess I'll stand for some questions because I have a feeling there's going to be some questions.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Burnt.
What necessitated the amendment, a more detailed explanation than what was on the form?
So, from understanding this through speaking with the chief, they have a formula that's based off of the population in the city as well as our calls for service. It's come from those meetings. They've been meeting. It's been ongoing. We take up 21% of the calls for service for the Idaho Humane Society. So with the formula that they punch the numbers in, we realized that from the contract that we have, we had underpaid up until this point to get us through fiscal year 19.
Okay. Madam Mayor.
Mr. Cavanagh.
If I'm not mistaken, too, based on the presentation we had from the Humane Society, is at least some of these funds are going towards their capital campaign for their new facility.
No, I would like the chief to come back and do a presentation on this. I thought maybe he was going to be here this evening. The chief and our finance department, as well as myself, has been part of conversations with the county and the 6 cities on the animal control facility and how best to move forward. During their cost engineering for the facility that they're currently constructing, they removed the space for the public piece. And so they're looking at staying in the Boise facility that they've been kind of band-aiding. And now they're coming back to all the partners saying there's going to be a capital expense for that to bring it up to code and to current standards. And that is the conversation that is being discussed right now in terms of how best to move forward. So there is no firm direction yet at this time.
Okay.
it's still under conversation, but the formula that Lieutenant Harper mentioned was also developed through this process in response to a lot of very good questions by the cities on how they came to their cost models. And that is why our finance departments also were involved to truth the numbers and to have more verification behind what their formula actually was. So this is the cost difference between what was in the budget and what the cost model did turn out to be that they have taken to each of the cities in their budget amendments as well. So the next part of this discussion is going to be, this is addressing a short term, and the more difficult conversation will be further down the road in terms of what is the long term and what those costs are, right, in moving forward. And so finance is really crunching the numbers on what Idaho Humane Society is giving us, as well as what it would look like if we had to do it ourselves. And we just kind of discussed maybe crunching numbers on a third item, and that would be the cities and the counties having a conversation, and if we all partner together without IHS, what that would look like. So there's 3 different things that most likely will come back for a discussion with council when we have some figures to really discuss.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
That is great information to share. Thank you for passing that along. And I guess I might suggest a 4th option. We have a citizen volunteer-ran humane society that exists in Meridian that was essentially formed when the city dissolved its service. They're currently in the process of adopting dogs out, and I think should be included in the conversation for Meridian. Maybe that doesn't meet the needs of everybody else, but I think that we need to look at what's going to be best for our citizens first, and perhaps that may be some cost efficiencies in that there's an organization that's already doing this great work that may be able to do it at a lower cost than what we're already paying the Humane Society.
And that will be a part of that local model, as I understand it. However, their facilities would not be something that could accommodate, so the facility piece would still be a big issue.
Madam Mayor, then I guess, because I know Lieutenant Harper did a great job of truthing some numbers. The total amount that we'll be paying the Humane Society this year with the budget amendment is how much?
With the amendment would be 390,660 prior to, I believe that's prior to the amendment. So almost 400,000.
And Madam Mayor, I guess to my point is if we've got an organization that's already doing some of this work without receiving dollars, imagine what they could be doing with 200 or 300 or even $400,000. And I'll just share, I'm not supportive of this amendment. I think it's important that maybe we have the chief come back. I have heard from many constituents the frustrations that they have had in dealing with IHS, and I'm concerned about the ongoing financial creep of this organization without our citizens receiving better service. So I don't think it's until we say no that maybe we're going to get a better response. So I won't be supporting this amendment. I would encourage the rest of the council to say no as well.
Madam Mayor, can I make a couple more comments? When I came here, we had our own animal control that we worked very closely with. Just knowing from some general conversations, there's been quite a bit of work done on trying to come up with a cost analysis of what it would cost us to take back the animal control services. And I know that that number is rather large. I can't give you an exact amount, but I know that it is a very large number outside of capital expenses because we don't have the facilities to do this or the employees or anything like that. So it is challenging, but I do remember when we had it. I've worked with IHS over time. and from my end have not received complaints in regards to their performance or anything like that, because usually that stuff ends up on my desk at some point. So I've seen it both ways, and I understand the decision you guys have to make tonight. But it is something that is important in our community, because we do know the number of calls that not us, that IHS receives in regards to animal-related matters. So, thank you.
And I think some of those comments were brought out in the initial discussions that the elected officials were part of, and have been further discussed in terms of what kind of an oversight committee or council should be had with that to bring better accountability and transparency. Because I can tell you I was very shocked and maybe disappointed with the lack thereof in terms of how they came to their numbers. And fortunately we had Ginny and the chief sitting there, and then Brad participated as well to start delving into the financial ends of it and asking some key questions. So those will be conversations further ahead, but we can certainly delay this action tonight for the workshop next week, and have the chief here to maybe provide further discussions and what all they're doing in their cost analysis in bringing options back to this council. So we will pull this and continue it to next week.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, item 10A is ordinance 19-1801. I will ask our city clerk to please read this by title only.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City of Meridian ordinance number 19-1801, and ordinance file H2018-0085 Verado West for annexation of a parcel of land located in Lot 4 of Section 5, Township 3 North, Range 1 East, Boise Meridian, Ada County, Idaho, as described in Attachment A, and annexing certain lands and territories situated in Ada County, Idaho, and adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the City of Meridian as requested by the City of Meridian, establishing and determining the land zoning classification of 19.44 acres of land from RUT to R15, medium-high density residential zoning district in the Meridian City Code, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing for a summary of the ordinance, and providing for a waiver of the reading rules, and providing an effective date.
Okay, council, is there anything further on this, or do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milo.
Move we approve ordinance number 19-1801 with suspension of rule.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 10A. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Cavanagh?
All ayes, motion carried. Council, anything under item A? A, 11. I would like to remind you that those that knew Mayor Corey, his memorial service is Friday on the 4th at 10:30 at the Meridian Methodist Church. And we will be having our conference room dedication next week on the 8th at 2:30 before our workshop.
Great. It's great.
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Cavanagh.
2 items for future meeting topics. Number 1 is the Government Accountability Officer. I think it's been almost 4 years since we started talking about this position, and I'm hoping that we can work over the next few weeks and months to get some resolution on that. So whether that's a topic at our workshop meeting or a future city council meeting, to me it seems that the time is right. One other item, Madam Mayor, is the legislature begins next week. We've had some ongoing conversations about testifying and representing the city in legislative and policy endeavors. Perhaps it would be prudent for us to have a conversation at the workshop meeting about what that policy or process looks like so that we as council can all be informed.
We did have an initial discussion on that, that for city positions, it would come to council. You've heard comments about the PTSD legislation, but we haven't seen legislation, so we haven't asked for any official statement. And the community development brought to you the electrical or electricians, and at this point, that's the only one that's really will be brought to the legislature with support from the city of Meridian. So as those pieces that want that official city support, that will come in front of council as those pieces of legislation come forward.
Great, Madam Mayor. Thank you. That's very insightful and great information to share. A couple clarifications. One, then, is the city hiring any lobbyists to represent us? Are they representing us on the community development piece? And I guess part two of that question is, do we still have a legislative subcommittee then that's meeting?
We do not have a legislative subcommittee, but we do have our ongoing contract with Sullivan Rehberger through our Public Works, and we will be talking through that contract with Public Works if they can represent the electrical or electricians contractor legislation and work with AIC.
Madam Mayor, unless there's any objection, I don't think that we need to schedule anything further on that. I think that's a same update that you would provide us next week.
Okay, and then I would ask on the, I'd heard on the accountability officer from Mr. Palmer and Mr. Kevner, if I could meet one-on-one with each of you to further discuss. Councilman Borton did ask me if I would sit down to get more detail, and so if I can have Morgan reach out to both of you to get that scheduled. Sure. Okay? Okay, I'm sorry. I have not felt good all evening, so if we're done, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes. Thank you.